Here on the Aussie Wire, we have talked about the fact that Victoria is, in my opinion, the basket case state. That's what should probably be on their number plates. Why? Well, because they are both the most highly taxed and the deepest in debt of all of the states in Australia. Quite an achievement, if you ask me. But it gets even better because a new Victorian budget has just been handed down and, well, there's more taxes. Here to talk about it with me is David Limbrick MP from Victoria. How are you, David?
Great, thanks. How are you, Topher?
I'm doing very well. Thank you very much for joining us. Look, I want to start by playing you a clip from Sky News because my jaw hit the floor. Let's just start here, have a watch, and see if you can believe some of what you're hearing.
There's also concerns an increase in land tax could be passed on to renters in an already volatile market. The Premier said it's not land tax driving up rent, but a lack of supply. He's also pointed out any land tax is fully tax deductible.
Well, landlords... any land tax is fully tax deductible.
As for whether the Premier would have delivered this budget if an election was looming...
Well, I did lock people in their homes for a couple of years, mate, and I didn't do that for political benefit. I did it because it was the right thing to do. As I said to you, with the greatest of respect, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think I've demonstrated to the Victorian community really clearly that I'm not just about doing the popular thing, I'm about doing what's right. And the right thing is to pay that credit card down.
Okay, he does say a few sensible things, and before I blow my stack
There's a lot to unpack there.
I'm going to hand over to you so I don't blow my stack, but let's start with, I think, two sensible things that he has said. One is that there needs to be an increase in supply of housing. This is something that you've spoken about before.
Yeah, we're in the middle of a stamp duty inquiry at the moment that I actually got up. And look, what the Premier said about land taxes not increasing rents directly, that's sort of true, but what they're doing here is disincentivizing people to become landlords, which is going to inhibit supply, which is exactly the problem that we've got. So, yes, landlords can't easily just pass on costs, but it will restrict the supply of people or disincentivize people to become landlords, which will restrict supply, which will drive up costs. So, I think it's a bit tricky, his wording there. He hasn't said anything that's technically wrong, but I think it's a bit misleading. Yeah.
I'll get to the other thing that I think it was correct that he said before we unpack the rest of what was in there, and that is that we need to be paying off this credit card, or Victoria needs to be paying off this credit card. This seems like an astonishing change of tune, though, from someone who doesn't seem to have been worried about the debt up until now.
He's absolutely right. We do need to pay off that debt. It's $31.5 billion. Now, there's a few reasons here that the government can't just keep borrowing forever. If they didn't make a commitment to do that, our credit rating would have been downgraded and Victoria would be in deep, deep trouble. We're paying millions and millions of dollars a day just in interest at the moment. If our credit rating got downgraded, bonds would be more expensive to sell for the government and we'd be in deep trouble. So they desperately needed to keep their credit rating. To their credit, pun intended, they actually got rated yesterday by S&P and they're going to maintain that. I think it's AA rating with S&P. So that's worked, but it's still a very dangerous tactic to increase taxes. They've done what they've always done. They've taken the soft targets in other budgets since I've been in Parliament. They've attacked gold miners, which, no one has any sympathy for. Foreign investors, no one has any sympathy for. This time they're attacking large companies with large payrolls to increase payroll tax. I think that's very dangerous. And also property investors with multiple properties. Now, I think the payroll tax increase is very dangerous because it's attacking large companies, but those same large companies are often national and they can choose where they hire their staff. They don't have to hire them in Victoria. I'm very concerned that this will backfire. I don't think, increasing a tax for a company to employ people, I think that's a very bad idea.
All right, so let's talk though for a second about why there is this credit card to even pay off in the first place. Why is Victoria the most deeply in debt state?
Well, we had massive lockdowns and the government spent, at the time, they called it investments or packages or free stuff. But of course, it's not free. You have to pay it back. Look, now some of that expenditure was probably necessary, right? But a lot of it was just nonsense. Okay, there was I think yesterday we were looking at it. There was something like $170 million worth of PPE, protective gear for medical staff that was unusable, didn't even meet our standards. They just it was useless. I think every parent who's got a child at school has a cupboard full of rat tests. They're probably about to expire, so that's a waste as well. I've heard of classrooms full of HEPA filters. They've got a storeroom full of HEPA filters. There is just so much waste. They were spending so much money so quickly that there is no way that they could have done it in a prudent way. And of course, now we've got to pay it back, and they're increasing taxes to do that.
Before we finish, I want to get to one last part of what he said that really sticks in my craw, and that is when he borderline boasted about the fact that he'd locked Victorians in their home for years and used that as evidence that he doesn't do what's popular, he does what's right. But we also know that he spent millions of dollars on focus groups and polling so that he could get the messaging right to make his lockdowns popular. I don't want to say what instinctively I want to say on air because it's going to get me into an awful lot of trouble. How does that strike you?
Well, I disagree. I think, my views are well known on this. I think lots of the measures that they took during COVID were extreme and unnecessary. The one that upsets me the most is closing our schools. Now, did that cost us a lot of money? Probably not, but I think it was absolutely unnecessary. Look, it's true. He has done some things that are very unpopular, and he's tried very hard to sell them to the public. That's why he was doing the polling, so that he could figure out what's popular and what's not. I think everyone wants to put the pandemic behind us, but we've got this great big debt. We took actions that many of us, including you and I, thought were unnecessary, but now we've got to deal with the aftermath of all this. So,
after the party comes the hangover, and I don't know, look, I said before the last Victorian election that if Victorians re-elect Daniel Andrews, then I'm calling it Victoria is the California of Australia, and I'm not talking about the weather, I'm talking about the dysfunction of the taxation and the very, very hostile business environment, and unfortunately it looks like it's headed that way.
Look, I would say, though, there's a couple of things in the budget that I liked. Not many things, but there's a couple of things. And credit where it's due. I never just criticize the government just because they're the government.
Sure.
So they did two things. One of them, they scaled back the public service. This was actually Liberal Democrats' policy, can you believe? So they're scaling back the public service.
Valid point.
They even used the same wording of us of cutting back the public service, excluding frontline workforce, which I was very impressed about. So I'll give them credit for that. Another thing that they've done, which is a really big thing, which I think will be good for Victoria, is they've agreed to abolish stamp duty for commercial and industrial property. I think that this is a good thing. This will hopefully result in Victoria being more attractive for investors who want to set up, factories or shops. Lower that initial capital cost. So, credit where it's due. They've done these two things, which are going to be very politically difficult for them. The unions are going to go crazy about especially the CPSU. They're going to go crazy about these job cuts. I think that the stamp duty change is not as far-reaching as what I would have liked, because they've excluded residential property, but still starting with industrial and commercial property is a good start. So it's not all bad, but it's not much good.
Well, look, thank you. I do appreciate the fact that you do try and be rational and balanced and fair, and also credit where it's due to you for getting the inquiry into stamp duty up. Now, it's not clear that this is a response to that inquiry, but the fact that you're putting it in the spotlight certainly won't have hurt in this particular case. That's all we have time for. David Limbrick MP, thank you so much for coming on the Aussie Wire today.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers.